In the year 716 BCE, following the death of Romulus, founder and the first king of Rome, a power vacuum erupted in the city. The Sabines wanted one of their own to be the king, so they rejected every Roman nominee. Romans, in turn, rejected every Sabine candidate. To avoid slipping into anarchy, senators divided themselves into groups of 10, each ruling for 5 days at a time. This was the first instance of an interregnum in Roman history, a period with no official ruler. A year went by, and the people became frustrated over the fact they had 100 rulers instead of one. Finally, a deal was struck. Romans could pick any man to be the king as long as he was Sabine. They chose Numa Pompilius, and the Sabines agreed. To everyone's surprise, he refused the kingship of Rome. Numa Pompilius was a deeply pious man who devoted his life to religious service. It was even said that he took long walks on which he conversed with the gods. He didn't dwell in the city and felt aversion toward its greedy, warmongering nature. It was only after much persuasion that he accepted. Numa was a pacifist, and during his reign, Rome saw 42 years of uninterrupted peace. He was aware that the Romans, by now so accustomed to war, would grow unruly during peacetime and provoke unnecessary conflicts. In order to prevent this, he introduced a great deal of religious ceremonies and festivities that would occupy time and minds of Romans. He brought Vestal virgins from Alba Longa and set the rules of tending the sacred flames. He also established the office of Pontifex Maximus, the high priest of Rome. Believing his successors would be preoccupied with war, consequently neglecting their religious duties, he refused to serve as pontifex, thus establishing a sovereign religious office that would not be meddled with by the future kings. It retained its independence from rulers until it was claimed for the emperors by Augustus. This title exists to this day, held by the Catholic Pope, the High Priest of Rome. Numa built the Temple of Janus in the Roman Forum. The temple doors were closed in times of peace and open in times of war. Roman historian Livy writes that the gates of Janus were shut only twice since the reign of Numa, once after the conclusion of the First Punic War and once in the reign of Emperor Augustus. After Numa's death in 673 BCE, Talos Castilius was elected king. In stark contrast to Numa, he cared little about religion. As soon as he ascended to the throne, he began seeking an excuse to start a war. He didn't have to wait long before the first opportunity arose. Roman peasants had a quarrel with Alba Longa, and Talos declared war. Armies marched on each other, but before the fighting could commence, the leader of the Alban forces, Metius, requested an audience with Talos. Metius warned him about the Etruscan threat to the north and proposed that single combat should decide the victor, in order to avoid pointless bloodshed. Seeing the logic in his argument, Talos agreed, but it wasn't single combat per se that decided the outcome of the battle. Both armies had a set of triplets, Romans the Horati and Albans the Coriati, so why not have them sort it out? Two of the Roman brothers were the first to fall, but the surviving brother managed to separate the Albans and kill each of them in turn. This chapter of Roman history inspired many works of art and literature, most notably the Oath of the Horati by Jacques-Louis David. Painted in 1786, it became a symbol of the French Revolution. After their defeat, Alba Longa became subservient to Rome. But this didn't go well with the people, as they technically didn't lose a single battle. Heeding the outcry of his people, Metius turned to the Etruscan city of Veii for help, and a plan to defeat Rome was hatched. When the Etruscans attacked, Rome called upon Alba for help. Metius answered the call, but at the crucial moment before the battle he left, exposing the Roman flank. Witnessing their allies abandon them, Roman courage wavered. Acting fast, Talos told his men it was him who sent the Albans away, to encircle the Etruscans. Emboldened by his words, the Romans marched forward and defeated the Veiites. Back in camp, he informed his soldiers of Alban treachery and executed Metius without trial. Now leaderless, the city of Alba Longa was razed to the ground and its inhabitants relocated to Rome. Talos Castilius reigned for 32 years, long enough for Rome's metamorphosis, from Numa's city of supreme worship to a realm of warmongering conquerors. After his death in 462 BCE, he was succeeded by Ancus Marcius, the grandson of Numa. He shared his grandfather's peaceful nature, but circumstances didn't allow him to dedicate his life to religion. Latin tribes rebelled against Rome, believing a leader occupied with the divine would be easily defeated on the battlefield, but they were no match for the Roman troops, battle-hardened under Talos, and Ancus defeated every rebelling city, starting with Politoria. After each victory, the inhabitants of the defeated city were moved to Rome. This greatly increased the size of the city, even expanding its borders to the west, across the Tiber. He built the first bridge over the river, making the crossing easier and safer. Maintenance and repairs of the bridge were a religious duty, and it stood over the Tiber for 1,000 years. Ancus Marcius also made the act of declaring wars a religious ceremony. The process consisted of Roman envoys traveling to enemy territory, reciting prayers and demands 3 times. First to the first person they met, then at the city gate, and one last time at the city forum. If their demands were not met in 33 days, they would throw a spear into enemy territory, signaling the beginning of hostilities. After subjugating the Latins, Ancus defeated the Veites and expanded Rome's frontier all the way to the sea, where he founded the port city of Ostia, which served as a launching point for all Roman ventures in the Mediterranean. During his reign, Lucius Tarquinius, later named Priscus, meaning the Elder, came to the city. He was a wealthy man of Etruscan origin and soon gained great renown by funding public projects and charities. Being well educated, he became one of the king's advisors and a close friend. Ancus Marcius died in 616 BCE, after reigning for 24 years. After his death, Tarquinius was named the guardian of his 2 sons. He sent the boys on a hunting trip and convinced the assembly to hold the elections immediately to avoid another interregnum. Enjoying great respect and admiration from the Romans, Tarquinius was elected new king. His first act was to increase the size of the Senate to 300. The new senators, owing their positions to him, were blindly loyal and Tarquinius could do as he pleased. After quelling some Latin rebellions, he commenced the building of Circus Maximus, the first and the largest stadium in ancient Rome. While he was making preparations to encircle Rome with a stone wall, the Sabines attacked. This attack was so sudden that the Sabines crossed the river Anio before the Romans could stop them. Great panic ensued in Rome, and Tarquinius, doubling the number of equites, rode out to stop the marching force. The bridge over the Anio was burned down, and the Romans used the panic in Sabine ranks to crush them. Tarquinius returned to Rome at the head of a great procession. He was riding a chariot pulled by 4 white horses. Behind him marched his legions, dragging along prisoners and all manner of loot and plunder. Doing so, he established one of the legendary Roman traditions, the Triumph. The Triumph was the greatest military honor a Roman general could receive, and this tradition continued even into the time of the Byzantine Empire. It was at this time that a peculiar rumor caught the queen's attention. A slave boy was engulfed in flame while he was sleeping, but when he woke up the fire disappeared, and the child was unscathed by the flame. The queen took this as an omen from the gods, and Tarquinius raised him as his own son. The boy's name was Servius Tullius, and he grew up to be a wise and capable young man. At this point, we should acknowledge that Tarquinius didn't hurt the sons of Ancus Marcius. They were still in Rome, and still bitter that a foreigner was sitting on their father's throne. A plan was devised, with 2 of their accomplices impersonating quarreling peasants. The argument got so heated that the king heard of it, and decided to hear the men out. While one of them was explaining the problem, the other struck the king down with an axe blow to the head. The assassins tried to flee but were caught and, with a little encouragement, revealed who they worked for. The palace was locked and the queen summoned the healers. Even though Tarquinius died instantly, the queen assured people that he's getting better and that Servius Tullius will act in his name until he regains full strength. Lucius Tarquinius Priscus died in 579 BCE after ruling for 37 years. Only after Servius had secured the support of the Senate was the death of Tarquinius finally announced, and Servius continued to rule as king despite never being elected. Servius made reforms to the voting body. He replaced the Comitia Curiata with the Comitia Centuriata. While the membership in the Curiata was reserved for patricians, the membership in the Centuriata was based on personal wealth. Servius conducted the first census to arrange the population in correct classes. Rome didn't have a professional army. Instead, legions consisted of citizens who had to arm themselves, with each class assigned a set of compulsory equipment. The classes were divided into centuries, and each century had one collective vote. The voting was, of course, heavily skewed in favor of the rich. Just like the sons of Ancus Marcius proved to be the undoing of Tarquinius Priscus, so were the sons of Tarquinius the undoing of Servius Tullius. In order to prevent them from doing anything suspicious, Servius married them to his daughters. Arnus Tarquinius cared little for the throne, for which his wife Tullia hated him, but his brother Lucius Tarquinius despised Servius and wanted the throne for himself. Tullia admired Lucius, so they killed their spouses and began plotting together. They were constantly reminding people that Servius was never elected and that the census was just a way for him to steal their property. When Lucius thought he acquired the support of the people, he walked to the Senate house with his bodyguards and called the session into meeting. While he was giving a lengthy speech to the senators, Servius marched in and asked for an explanation. Lucius, being a much younger and stronger man, physically threw Servius out of the Senate, where he was killed by the bodyguards. Servius Tullius reigned for 44 years and died in 534 BCE. Lucius Tarquinius, later named Superbus, meaning the proud, reigned with such cruelty and malice that it brought the age of kings to an end. During his reign, Tarquinius Superbus executed anyone who opposed him. He confiscated property as he saw fit and reduced the Senate to a symbolic role. This all lasted until Sextus Tarquinius, son of the king, violated the woman named Lucretia. After the criminal act was done, she summoned her father, Spurius Lucretius, and her husband Lucius Tarquinius Collatinus. The two men came accompanied by Publius Valerius and Lucius Junius Brutus. When Lucretia told them what had happened, overwhelmed by shame, she took her own life. The grieving men swore to end the tyranny of the Tarquins. They went to the forum and told the story of Lucretia. They reminded people that the king took the throne by force and spoke about all the terrors he committed. The Roman population, oppressed for so long, decided to banish the Tarquins from the city. Brutus then went to a nearby army camp. The army joined the revolutionaries and marched on Rome. Realizing what had happened, Tarquinius fled to Etruria with his family, after ruling for 25 years. After reaching the city, the Romans swore an oath never to let one man rule Rome again. This marked the end of the monarchy, which lasted for 244 years, making way for the rise of the Republic. Allegedly, the year was 509 BCE, exactly 1 year before the beginning of democracy in Athens. Were there really 7 kings of Rome? Most probably not. Never in history did 7 rulers in a row enjoy on average 35 years of reign. After the sack of Rome in 390 BCE, most of the historical records were lost. The only thing we can say for certain is that before the formation of the Republic, Rome was ruled by kings, and the last kings of Rome were of Etruscan origin. Few buildings like Numa's Regia, Curia Hostilia, and the Servian Wall still bear the names of the ancient kings, so we can assume at least some of them existed. A likely explanation is that a number of kings were combined into these legendary figures, and their reigns were adjusted to fit the legendary chronology. The first 4 kings seem largely fictional, even if the events of their reigns did actually happen. Romulus was credited with establishing social and political systems. Peaceful Numa was given all matters concerning religion. Talos Castilius and Ancus Marcius expanded Rome's population and influence by fighting expansionist wars. The last 3 kings of the Tarquin dynasty seem to be real people, although they may have been only one person in reality, since their recorded achievements were oddly similar. In this period, Rome grew to be the chief city in Latium, and it is possible that the Romans exercised the general suzerainty over the Latin cities. After they conquered the lowlands of central Italy, they turned their heads towards the hills and mountains to the east for new conquests. North of the Tiber lay the loose confederation of Etruscan city-states, which developed lasting rivalries with Rome. This was the world in which the most famous republic of all time was born. Join us next time as we discuss these trying times. The triumph was the greatest military honor a German general...